You're in Africa, 500,000 years ago. It's around 3 a.m., pitch black, and something is breathing outside your shelter. Something big. You can't see it, but you can hear it. You have no gun, no walls, no phone to call anyone. You have a stick, a rock, and a brain that is currently doing absolutely nothing useful, and somehow, you make it to morning. This happened, constantly, for hundreds of thousands of years. Generation after generation of our ancestors woke up every single day in a world that was actively trying to eat them, and they figured out how to not get eaten. They didn't just survive, they spread to every continent on Earth, they walked into ice ages, they crossed deserts, they settled every terrain imaginable, while being, physically speaking, embarrassingly unimpressive. No fangs, no claws, no armor, medium speed on a good day, night vision so bad that a house cat would genuinely pity them, and they beat the most terrifying predators the planet has ever produced. How? That's what we're getting into today, and I promise you, by the end of this, you will look at your own species with either deep respect or mild existential horror, possibly both. Let's start with the actual size of the problem, because people hear ancient predators, and they picture something vaguely like a bigger wolf, a slightly chunkier bear, something you could maybe outrun on a good day if you were really motivated. No, stop. Absolutely not. During the Pleistocene, roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, Earth was running a very different operating system. The megafauna of this period were not the animals we know today. They were something else entirely. Take the cave lion, Panthera spelaea. This was not a lion like the ones you see on wildlife documentaries looking majestic on a rock. This was a lion roughly 25% larger than any lion alive today, with no mane, built for colder climates, and apparently completely uninterested in the concept of fear. We know from cave paintings, actual art left by the people who lived alongside these animals, that cave lions hunted in coordinated groups and targeted everything from horses to young mammoths. They were not ambush specialists waiting in bushes. They were active, social, relentless hunters. Then there was Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, canine teeth up to 28 centimeters long. That's longer than your forearm from wrist to elbow, muscled like a wrestler. Estimated bite force that, combined with those teeth, could puncture the skull of a bison. Smilodon didn't need to be fast, it just needed to get close enough to do that one specific thing it was absolutely catastrophically good at. The cave hyena, Crocuta spelaea. Modern spotted hyenas are already animals that can crack the femur of a wildebeest with their jaws and laugh about it. The Pleistocene version was bigger. They hunted in packs. They scavenged aggressively. They followed human camps. There's fossil evidence of hyenas living alongside humans in the same cave systems in Europe, and that detail should make you deeply uncomfortable. And then, there's the one that gets me every time. The short-faced bear, Arctodus simus, 1.8 meters at the shoulder, estimated weight up to 1,100 kilograms, running speed of somewhere between 60 and 80 kilometers per hour. Let me be clear about what 80 kilometers per hour looks like. That's faster than a horse at full gallop. This bear could outrun a horse. It was also 4 times the weight of a modern grizzly. If a short-faced bear decided you were interesting, that was it. That was your entire day. Gone. Your entire everything, actually. Our ancestors shared their world with all of this. Not occasionally, constantly. These animals were part of the landscape in the same way traffic is part of modern life. Always there, always potentially lethal, requiring constant awareness just to get through the week, and our ancestors figured it out. The first thing they figured out, and this sounds obvious, but it's actually profound, is that alone, they were prey. Together, they were a problem. Group living for early humans wasn't a lifestyle choice. It wasn't about socializing or companionship or whatever. It was a hard survival necessity enforced by the fact that solo humans got eaten and groups of humans got eaten significantly less often. Natural selection is not subtle about this kind of thing. Here's the mechanism. Predators. But even apex ones, even enormous ones, are deeply risk-averse. Not because they're cowards, because they're rational. An injured predator in the wild is a dead predator in slow motion. A cave lion that takes a spear to the shoulder, a rock to the eye, a bone-shattering kick to the knee. That lion is now compromised. It can't hunt efficiently. It loses competitive access to resources. It can be displaced by rivals. One bad interaction with prey can end a predator's life weeks later. So predators don't attack things that fight back, not if they can find something easier. A group of humans, even early humans, even Homo erectus, that turns around, closes ranks, starts screaming, and throws things changes the math completely for a predator doing its threat assessment. Suddenly, what looked like lunch looks like a potential career-ending injury. The predator recalculates. find something else. This is documented in modern hunter-gatherer research. The Hadza of Tanzania, the San people of southern Africa. Both groups have documented traditions of confronting large predators, lions, leopards, African wild dogs, as coordinated groups, walking toward them, making noise, advancing. The predators back off, not because the humans could necessarily win a direct physical confrontation, but because the cost-benefit no longer makes sense from the predator's perspective. Our ancestors lived this every day. The group was the weapon. The group was the armor. Being separated from the group was the most dangerous thing that could happen to you, and the social bonds holding those groups together weren't just emotional warmth. They were survival infrastructure. Fire deserves its own section, because fire is genuinely one of the most dramatic technological revolutions in human history, and we don't talk about it enough in these terms. Evidence for controlled fire use by hominins goes back at least 1 million years, with contested evidence from South Africa pushing it potentially further, and what fire did to the predator-prey dynamic between humans and megafauna is almost impossible to overstate. Every major terrestrial predator is uncomfortable around fire. This isn't speculation. It's documented in wildlife research repeatedly and consistently. Lions avoid active campfires. Leopards won't approach open flame. Cave bears, based on what we know of their behavior, showed similar aversion. The reasons are probably evolutionary. Fire means unpredictability, burning, pain, death. Animals that learned to avoid it survived more often than animals that didn't. For humans, this meant that a fire burning through the night was effectively an alarm system, a fence, and a predator deterrent all in one. You could sleep with significantly more confidence if there was an active fire on the perimeter of your camp. Not complete safety. Nothing in the Pleistocene offered complete safety, but a dramatically reduced probability of something large deciding tonight was a good night to test its luck. But passive protection was only part of it. There's substantial evidence that early humans used fire actively and aggressively, driving animals off cliffs using coordinated fire lines, creating barriers to direct prey into kill zones, using torches in direct confrontations with predators. Archaeological sites across Europe and Africa show burn patterns consistent with deliberate landscape manipulation. Early humans reshaping entire environments using fire to serve their own needs. Picture being a cave lion doing its normal nightly patrol, and suddenly finding that the weird bipeds have set the entire eastern side of the valley on fire in a coordinated pattern, and are now herding something toward you that you didn't ask for. Fire wasn't just defensive, it was an active tool of environmental control, and the species that could use it had an advantage against every species that couldn't, which was every other species. Now let's talk about what they were actually hitting things with, because the tool development story is remarkable. The oldest known wooden spears, actual engineered projectile weapons, not just pointy sticks, were found in Schöningen, Germany. They date to around 300,000 years ago, and these weren't crude. They were crafted from spruce wood, shaped to be thicker toward the front for balance and weight distribution, tapering toward the back. Whoever made these understood aerodynamics. They'd clearly thrown enough things at enough targets to develop an intuition for what flew straight and what didn't. Later came hafted weapons, stone tips attached to wooden handles using plant-based adhesives and sinew wrapping. This technology, documented back at least 200,000 years, dramatically increased penetrating power and durability. Someone 200,000 years ago was sitting somewhere doing what is essentially craftwork, carefully engineering a composite tool. That kind of abstract forward planning, I'm going to make a thing now that will help me do a different thing later, is a fundamentally human cognitive leap. Then came the atlatl, the spear thrower, a device that extends the effective lever arm of the human arm, dramatically increasing the speed and force of a thrown spear. With an atlatl, a human can launch a spear over 100 meters, with impact force comparable to a modern crossbow bolt. This exists in archaeological record going back at least 17,000 years, and possibly much earlier. Here's why this matters so much in predator context. Ranged weapons completely rewrite the rules of predator-prey interaction. The fundamental advantage any predator has over prey is proximity. You have to be close to kill something with teeth or claws, but a human with an atlatl-launched spear can kill at a range where the predator physically cannot reach them yet. You are now in the danger zone for the animal, before the animal is in the danger zone for you. For species that had evolved over millions of years facing prey that needed to be caught and pinned and bitten, this was an entirely new problem they had no behavioral adaptation for. The rules they'd been playing by for millennia suddenly didn't apply anymore. There's something else that doesn't get discussed enough in this context, and it's pure cognitive processing power. Predators are smart. I want to be clear about that. A leopard is an extraordinarily sophisticated predator. Wolves are tactically complex. Cave lions were apparently capable of coordinated group hunting. These are not dumb animals, but they are smart in specialized, narrow ways, optimized for specific tasks. Their intelligence is domain-specific. Reading terrain for ambush, tracking prey movement, coordinating pursuit. What they don't do is build abstract models of the world, plan across long-time scales, or transmit accumulated knowledge across generations to individuals who weren't there. Humans do all three of those things. And those three things are absolutely devastating advantages when you're operating in a dangerous environment. The ability to model animal behavior, to understand that cave lions den in specific locations during specific seasons, that hyenas are most active at certain times, that certain water sources are contested territory that should be avoided when a rival predator clan is active. This kind of environmental knowledge, accumulated and transmitted through language, changes how every individual in a group interacts with danger. There's a large cat near the eastern ridge. Stay west today. That sentence saves lives. The ability to communicate specific, detailed, actionable threat information across a group to people who didn't personally observe the threat is something no other animal can do to that degree. It's a cognitive superpower that's so familiar to us we don't recognize what it actually is. Track reading is another massively underappreciated skill in this context. From a set of prints, an experienced tracker can determine the species, approximate size, direction of travel, speed, how recently it passed, whether it was hunting or traveling. This skill, still practiced today by sand trackers, Hadza hunters, and others, would have allowed ancient humans to proactively detect and avoid predator territory rather than stumbling into it by accident. Avoidance is the best survival strategy. Better than fighting, better than running. Knowing where the danger is before you encounter it and routing around it is how you get to have boring, uneventful days in a world full of things that want to eat you. And humans were building this knowledge base continuously, upgrading it with every generation, every individual who survived long enough to share what they'd learned. Here is a thing that actually happened. Not a theory, not a hypothesis, a documented thing. Researchers studying the Hadza in Tanzania observed hunters walking toward a group of lions feeding on a kill, and a group of about 8 humans making noise, advancing confidently, and the lions backed off and let them take the carcass. The lions weren't weak. The lions weren't sick. The lions just did their threat assessment and concluded that engaging with 8 loud, advancing, potentially weapon-holding bipeds over one carcass didn't make financial sense, so they left. This behavior, this aggressive confidence projection, is a learned, transmitted cultural technology just as much as spear making is. It is a strategy for exploiting a specific vulnerability in predator psychology. Ambush hunters are specialized for a specific type of encounter. Prey that panics, prey that runs, prey that behaves like prey. When the prey doesn't behave like prey, when it advances instead of fleeing, when it makes itself larger, when it makes noise instead of going quiet, the predator's behavioral script breaks down. Running triggers pursuit, standing your ground, advancing, making noise. This activates a completely different part of the predator's decision tree, and that part usually concludes with, "This is not worth it." Our ancestors learned this, not from a book, not from a university course, through brutal empirical testing over hundreds of thousands of years. The individuals who learned it survived. The ones who panicked and ran were gradually selected out of the gene pool by cave lions who appreciated easy meals. What remained were people who had internalized, at a deep behavioral level, that projecting confidence toward predators was a viable survival strategy. They were running a bluff, an absolutely magnificent species-wide bluff. We are more dangerous than we look. And they backed it up with tools, with fire, with coordinated group response, with the willingness to actually throw sharp things at the face of a 300-kilogram cat. It wasn't entirely a bluff, actually. And then they went further, because surviving alongside the megafauna wasn't enough apparently. Humans, being humans, eventually started hunting the megafauna, actively, systematically, as a food source. There's archaeological evidence of mammoth hunting sites across Eurasia and the Americas, kill sites where multiple mammoths were driven into bogs, off cliffs, into narrow valleys, and systematically killed with coordinated spear throwing. Evidence of Neanderthals hunting cave bears, not scavenging the carcasses, hunting them in their caves. Evidence of early modern humans pursuing and killing animals that, individually, would have killed any one of them without serious difficulty. The transition from avoiding megafauna to actively hunting it represents one of the most dramatic behavioral shifts in human prehistory. And it tracks with tool development, with population size, with the accumulation of ecological knowledge, the point at which humans had enough group size, enough technology, enough coordinated tactics, and enough understanding of animal behavior that the predator-prey relationship began, quietly, to reverse. And then, this is the part that changes everything. The megafauna started disappearing. The timing is uncomfortable. Wherever modern humans arrived, the large animals started going extinct. North America's mammoths, mastodons, short-faced bears, American lions, American horses, glyptodonts, all gone within roughly 2,000 years of human arrival, around 13,000 years ago. Australia's megafauna, the giant wombats, the 200-kilogram kangaroos, the marsupial lions, gone roughly 46,000 years ago, shortly after the first Australians arrived. The same pattern, continent after continent. These animals had survived ice ages. They'd survived volcanic winters. They'd been through everything the planet could throw at a species and made it through. And then humans showed up, and within a few thousand years, they were gone. The debate between climate change and human hunting pressure as the primary driver is real and ongoing and genuinely complex. But the geographic and temporal correlation between human arrival and megafauna extinction is not subtle. These animals had zero behavioral preparation for coordinated bipedal hunters with projectile weapons who could communicate, plan, and pursue across days. They had no species memory of what that threat profile even looked like. They didn't run from humans the way modern animals run from humans. They hadn't learned to yet. They ran out of time to learn. So here's the full picture. A species with no meaningful physical advantages, no claws, no venom, no armor, mediocre speed, terrible night vision, entered one of the most dangerous ecological landscapes in the history of the planet and somehow came out on top. Not through one advantage, through a layered stack of advantages that individually were interesting and collectively were overwhelming. Group coordination that made them difficult and costly to attack. Fire that gave them light, heat, and a predator deterrent they could carry and project. Engineered tools that extended their killing range beyond the reach of any predator's claws. Cognitive modeling that let them anticipate and avoid danger proactively. Language that let them share survival knowledge across individuals and generations, and a psychological willingness to stand their ground, advance on things much larger than them, and project a confidence that probably wasn't entirely warranted but turned out to be self-fulfilling. They started as prey. They ended as the apex predator of every ecosystem they entered. The animals that hunted them became the animals they hunted, and then the animals that disappeared. So now when you come across a 3mm spider and you scream like a 5-year-old girl, remember that somewhere on Earth, 50,000 years ago, one of your ancestors came face to face with a 3-meter tall, 1-ton giant bear and somehow survived.